Hey y'all, it's Mary, and welcome to part 3 of Draw My Life. If you haven't already watched part 1 or part 2 of this Draw My Life series, you might want to check the info box below for the links to that. But for now, let's get started. Okay, so when I was in middle school and high school, I got my start in storytelling by being on the yearbook staff. And then by the time I was in college, I was editor of the university magazine. Having an audience that big was amazing, and I was like, we're gonna do some epic-ish here. Like this article that we did on the University of South Carolina having its first gay student body president. And when I was editor, I had a team of people who were helping me put together the magazine, but one time this photographer just went MIA, totally missing on the job. I was like, I guess I have to take the photos, but when I looked at this camera, I was so intimidated by it. I always considered myself a horrible photographer, but I sucked it up. I took these photos and they were actually kind of good. And that was the beginning of my relationship with cameras. I studied journalism, and I always thought I was going to work in news. I just loved being in the middle of action. That was my favorite place to be. For my journalism degree, we had an assignment to make a 2-minute video, and I was editing that thing for days. It was the hardest thing I had done up until that point, but it was also the most rewarding because it involved everything I had learned in one medium, and that's where I fell in love with video. Here's a little bit of that first video I made.
Some of my friends are getting a little crazy when I'm always snapping their picture.
Now that Mary Pinckney has this camera, it can become a problem sometimes because you've always got, you never know when you might have a picture taken. And you never know when it might show up on the World Wide Web.
Okay, let's move on from that. So at some point in college, I lived in an apartment complex that was off campus, and there was this shuttle bus that drove me from my place to school. And one day, there was a boy on it, and somehow we started talking, I guess. And then when we got off the bus and started going to our place, we were talking some more. And as we were chatting, I told him that I had this old espresso machine that somebody in my family had given me, and it was busted. And I told him I wish I could fix it because I love coffee so much. And of course, he was like, I can totally fix that. I don't believe in retrospect that he knew what he was doing, but lucky for him, when he came over, we spent so much time just chatting with each other that we never even looked at the espresso machine. Espresso machine was over there like, hello. So we got together and started dating, but then a few months later, in true college relationship style, we broke up, and that was the end of it. Or so I thought back then. We will be updating that narrative later, but for now, let's jump to what a big nerd I was at school. I was a really good student. I got a lot of A's. So when I graduated, I figured I'm about to kick the real world's ass. But you know, poor little me, I just had no idea. So when I was in college, my grandfather had dementia, and he ended up passing away. And it ended up that I was the oldest person in the family that was in charge of managing his estate. Now, I studied journalism. I didn't know what an estate was. I didn't know nothing about money, nothing about nothing. And all of a sudden, I was in charge of this huge financial legal process. But that wasn't it, because as I started going through my grandfather's records, I learned that there was this financial advisor at this big old fancy investment firm that had access to my grandfather's accounts, and he had just been writing checks to himself at a time when my grandfather had dementia. And I was like, oh, hell no. And that turned into me suing one of the world's biggest financial firms and putting myself at the starting end of this crazy-ass maze where I was trying to learn securities law and probate law and how a court case works. And basically the real world was like, girl, let me introduce myself, okay? So in the face of this unexpected chaos, I was really facing two doors. Number one, I could just freak out, or number two, I could step up and figure it out. And if I'm being honest, I really was going in between those doors a lot, but I kept stubbornly pushing my way through door number 2, and I ended up catching a lot of important points in the case that even my attorney missed. And it made me realize you don't have to be an expert to handle ish. You just got to be stubborn, believe in what you're doing, and put in the hours. So eventually I came out the other end of things, and that financial guy who wrote them checks to himself got in trouble with the state's attorney general and had to stop doing business.